Hello. So class, today I'm going to show you all how to make a flyer game where the goal is to stay on screen for as long as you can and avoid the things that are going to push you off the screen, just like this. So in order to get started, you're going to click onto level 23, and we're going to start actually with level 2. So this game has already set up a sprite for you, and this is our player sprite. Now, if you want, you can go change that. I'm going to keep it the same, but if you want to change your character, you can do that. The next thing you want to do, you want to also make sure you have something which is a target, which you want your character to collect. So a reward, it could be food, it could be a coin. I'll keep it as a coin for this one. And then you want two things that are going to be flying through the air that are going to try to push your character off the screen. Now, for my actual game, I used bees, but it could really be anything that might be an obstacle. All right. So your first step is going to be to find the code comment game setup. So that's going to be at the top. So you need to create, as well as our player, because we have that right here, you need to create 3 more sprites. So you need the target and you need 2 obstacles. So let's first make the target. I'm going to drag this block out and I'm going to call it target. And I'm going to set the animation target to be the coin, right? Because the coin is the target. That is what we want to reach. So target.set animation coin. And if we go run that, we have the coin on the screen. Awesome. Okay. Next thing we need is the obstacle. And we have 2 obstacles. So I'm going to call the first one obstacle 1. And we're going to set the animation to rock. We have a rock in the back. And then we're going to create obstacle 2. And we have that right on top of the coin. I'm just going to move it to the right. Sorry, to the left. Okay. And then we want to make obstacle 2, which is going to be the same animation. By the way, 2 different things can share the same animation. That is totally fine. And we will also call this one rock. I'm going to put it to the right. We now have our 2 rocks and our player. So once you have that on the screen, you are doing things right. There we go. Now, the next thing, set each sprite to the animation we chose it. So we have the animations on the screen. Perfect. You guys can change these if you want back there, but I'm going to keep them the same. Scale each one to the size you want. So if you want to change the size, it's going to be this block. I'm fine with the sizes, so I'm not going to change that. And then place them where you want. So I put them on the screen. You can put them off the screen too, whatever. As long as you see them, you're good. Next, you want to set the starting velocities of the obstacles. So what are the obstacles? The obstacles are the rocks. And you want to make sure they are moving off the screen. Now, just like we see in the corner here, you want one of the rocks to be moving across the screen and one to be moving down. If you remember from earlier, if you're going left and right, that is going to be X. So we're going to start with a velocity X block. And let's go start with obstacle 1. That's the first rock. Obstacle 1.x velocity. And if X is going up, then that means the rock is moving across the screen. So we're going to set it to a positive X velocity. I'm going to pick 5, just because. And if we run that, we have one of the rocks, which is going across the screen. So that's perfect. We now want to do the same thing for obstacle 2, but we want it to, instead of going across the screen, if you look at this box, we want it going down the screen. So in order to make it go down, we need to change the Y velocity. And let's go make that, because since the more you add to Y, the further down it goes, we will also make it positive. We'll also make it 5. And we end up with a situation here where we have obstacle 2, where Y keeps going down by 5 every time, and obstacle 1, where X keeps going up by 5 every time. And that results in one going across the screen, one going down. So take a minute to go copy the code if you need to. You can rewatch if you need to. But once you've done that and you've got things flying across the screen, you are good to go to level 3. All right, so what do we do in level 3? Well, let's read the instructions. So level 3, we need to find the code comment falling. There it is, right over there. So it says use the counter pattern to, with the player's sprite velocity Y, make the flyer fall. Okay. Well, we kind of know the block we need, right? Because it gives us a velocity Y block. And we are making the player fall. So I'm going to start with a player.velocity Y. And it says use the counter pattern. Now, what is the counter pattern? The counter pattern isn't just setting the velocity of a number. That's just no pattern. That's just setting the number. The counter pattern is setting something to something plus or minus itself. So for this case, player.velocity y is going to be player.velocity is equal to itself. And then you can either plus or minus 1. Now we want the thing to fall. And again, the more you add to y, the lower down you go. So we want it to be positive. And I'm just going to say plus 1. Now what should happen when we run this is every time the draw loop runs, it's going to start falling faster and faster, right? Because it's adding 1 to the velocity every time. And there he goes. We're off the screen, right? See him going faster and faster. So it should work when it's going faster and faster. If it is going the same speed as it's going down, you did not use the counter pattern. So please make sure you're being careful there. Again, player.velocity y is equal to player.velocity y plus 1. All right. So literally if it falls off the screen, you've passed the level. Awesome. But this isn't much of a game yet. So we're going to have to add new things. Specifically, how are we going to control our player? So we're going to find the code comment that says player controls. That's step number 1. And that is going to be right here. So it says change the y velocity, which is how far it goes up and down when the user clicks up. So you want it to start going up when the user clicks up. So I'm going to go if, and then for any key commands, it's going to be the yellow block under world. And I'm going to say if key down is equal to up. So if I'm pressing the up key, I want my sprite to go up. Now, if we look at the y, it appears as the higher you go, the less y is, right? And y ends at 0. So we actually, when we press up, if we want our thing to go up, we want our velocity y, which is how far it's going up, to be a negative number, right? Because you want y to go less. It's velocity x, sorry. So I'm going to set this player.velocity y is equal to 1. Oh, sorry, is equal to 1. And you do not need to use the counter pattern here. So if we try that, the awkward thing is at 1, we're kind of still falling, right? I'm mashing the up key. So it has to be a bigger number than 1. I would actually recommend a number from 5 to 10, and I'm actually going to do 10. Oh, sorry, negative 10. So I'm actually going to do negative 10. And if we do that, we can see our character is now jumping on the screen, right? Awesome. So if your character is jumping and it's not falling off the whole time, that is how you know you succeeded. And again, my recommendation for the jump is going to be a number from -5 to -10, although you could do something different too. All right, next level. We are really getting through this. Okay, so floating left and right. So you should also be able to control the flyer to go left and right, right? If you're just jumping in the middle, it's kind of a boring game. So under player control, we were just there. There's a block that says decrease the x velocity when the user clicks left, right? So you want to go left, x wants to go down when you press the left key. So again, we know where the if block is, and we know where the command is for key down. And we just want to change that from up to left. If you press left, the x velocity. So player.velocity x is equal to, we want it to go down, right? So down is minus. I'm going to do -3. And now you want to test that to see when you go left, does it start going left? And it does, right? So that's perfect. Now you want to do the opposite so that the player goes the other direction when a right is pressed. And I'm sure you guys have worked out how to do this, but just watch me. Right. And then it is going to be, instead of -3, just make it, if you did minus on the last one, make it just a positive. And if we do that, I'm now able to move right and left. Cool. So once your sprite is going to be able to kind of jump around and you're able to move it right and left, you are good to move to the next level. So let's go do that. All right. So the next thing, we need to be able to collect our coin, I think. Nope, sorry. We're going to start with looping. So looping. What looping is making sure that when a sprite goes off the screen, right? Because right now the rocks go off the screen, they never come back. So looping is making sure that when the rock goes off the screen, it does a loop and pops back on the right side. So it keeps coming back, right? It doesn't just go off and leave. So let's look at the first obstacle. So obstacle 1 is the one that goes off the screen to the right. So it kind of goes like, starts over here, and this X gets bigger, 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 hits 400, and then it goes off the screen, right? And it's just keeping going off the screen, and we can't see it anymore. So I am going to start an if block under the code block looping. Okay. And it says reset its X property to loop it back to the other side of the screen if it moves off the screen. So there's an if in that instruction. So it is going to be an if block. And we're going to do if obstacle 1 dot, and again, it moved off the screen this way, right? So that's X and Y moving right and left. Obstacle 1 dot X, which is where it is on the X axis. If that is greater than, and the last number on the screen is 400, right? But I kind of want to give it a delay so the rock doesn't shoot back immediately. I'm going to say if it's greater than maybe 430, we want to loop it back. So how do you loop it back? Go make obstacle 1 dot X on this side of the screen, right? So the smallest number is 0. If we want to go below 0 so that it slowly comes on the screen, let's pick a negative number. I'm going to say negative 30. And let's go see if that works. And I spelled obstacle wrong, so it won't, but now it'll work. And if we look at that, the rock's going to go off the screen and then it comes back. And it's going to go off and it's going to come back. Beautiful. Now you want to do the same thing for your second obstacle, but your second obstacle is moving on the Y, right? So this time you want to check to see if it's gone off the screen for Y. And if it goes off the screen for Y, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be greater than 400, right? So if obstacle 2 dot is greater than, I'm not going to say 430, right? Because that means it's off the screen, because 400 is the most you can be on the screen. If obstacle Y is 430, so that means if the object is here, let's put it back up here. And where would that be? That would also be a negative number. So if obstacle 2 goes off the screen, set the Y so it loops back. So obstacle 2.y is equal to, and again, we'll make it a negative number, right? So that it's at the top of the screen. And once again, I spelled it wrong. So spelling again has to be perfect, otherwise it doesn't run. There we go. Yeah. And it is now looping, and it is now looping. Perfect. And these things will keep looping forever, right? Because you have, as long as the block goes over 400, which means it's off the screen, it'll loop back to a negative number. So it'll come back on the screen. And that is how you do this level. Now, the one extra thing for this level, which is a lot of people miss this actually, is if it moves off the screen, as well as resetting it so that it keeps looping back, it's a really boring game if the rock always comes back in the same spot, right? Because it's so easy to dodge. Yeah, right. I know it's going to come exactly there. Cool. And then I get the coin. So that's super, super boring. So whenever it goes off the screen, you want to randomize the axis that you are not giving a value to. So for example, the obstacle.x, we are moving it back to negative 30, moving it back to negative 30, but we're not doing anything with the y, right? For obstacle 1. So if you have an x in here, go ahead and take the y, obstacle 1.y, and let's go make that a random number. And it gives us a number. It actually says 50 and 350. So we will take those exact. Like if they give it to us for free, we'll take it. So 50, 350. And we'll try that. So it should come back at a random number now. That kind of looked the same, but there we go. Okay, so it is coming back random. And again, now every time it goes across the screen, its Y location will be random. Now we want to do the same thing for the second one. So we are saying that we are giving it a Y value, right? So that's already given. So we actually want to randomize, instead of the Y value for obstacle 2, we're going to randomize the X value. I'm really not good at spelling obstacle. Okay. So obstacle 2, we're going to again set that to a random number, and they give us the number, right? So 5350. And what that's going to give us are obstacles that when they come off the screen, they kind of come back randomly. There we go. Do you see that? Super random. So we do not know where they're going to go. Awesome. So once the obstacle's going off the screen like that, go ahead and move to the next level. All right. So we are really getting close to the end. The only thing that we need to do is make sure that the obstacles now start to push our sprite, right? So we want them to be pushed off the screen. Okay. Oh, yeah. So let's start with that. So create 2 new collisions that make 2 obstacles push the player across the screen. So right now the player just kind of goes through the obstacles, right? If you hit the rock, nothing happens. So you don't need an if block for this. You actually just need a collision block. So make the obstacles push the player. You can really use any of these, right? So the one that it wants you to use is actually sprite.displace. So I'm going to do obstacle1.displace player. And what that does, displace means like it will kind of it will take your spot, right? So if you're in the way of the rock will see the rock move me there, right? I didn't move, but the rock will move me. That's what displace does. So displace is the one that the game wants you to use. You could kind of play with this, right? You could also have it be, you know, bouncing off, right? Which means like maybe when you hit the rock, it'll shoot you off in a certain direction. Again, you can go with any of these, but the most simple one is going to be displace. And that's actually the one that probably makes the game the most playable. So you can play with the other ones, but definitely try out displace because that's the one that you're supposed to use. Obstacle 2, we also want that displace the player. And now we have 2 rocks that if you're not careful, they're gonna push you off the screen. Yikes. Okay, but that's exactly what you want to do. Next thing, you want to reset the coin when the player touches it. So how do you know if the player is touching the coin? Well, you need an if block, right? So if the player is touching the coin and you see is touching under sprites. So if player is touching target, you want the coin to first of all go to a random location, right? Let's go do that. And it's going to be coin.x and coin.y, right? Because we don't just want it to go random across in one direction. We want to go random everywhere on the screen. So that's going to be x and y. And we'll go target.x and target.y. We will give them a random spot on the screen. Now, again, you could pick a number that's like 1 in 400, which is all the spots on the screen. I kind of want to pick a number between 50 and 350, just so it's not right on the edges. That would kind of be baiting you into losing the game. But again, that's just me picking that. As long as the numbers are between 1 and 400, they're super good. And what now happens if we hit the coin is that the coin will just jump to oh my god, the coin will jump to a random spot. Now the really boring thing about this is that there's no scoreboard, right? So if you got 20 coins versus if you just got 2, you have no idea, right? I've already lost count. So even though there are no instructions for this, I really do recommend that you make a scoreboard. So how do you do that? Well, first thing, you need to make your score, right? So I'm going to create a variable called score. And really important, I am creating this outside of the draw loop. So we'll call the variable score. You could also call it points or whatever you want to call it. And we'll set it to 0, right? Because you start the game with 0. Now, in this if loop, right, when we have the coin go random when you touch it, I also want to make it at a point. So I'm going to say when the player touches the coin, score is equal to, and again, it's the counter pattern, right? Score plus 1. And what I'm basically telling the computer is when I hit a coin, add 1 to my score. It's just a fancy way of saying it. So cool. It is now adding 1 to score, but wait, it's still not showing anything on the screen. Why is that? Well, we need to actually print the text on the screen that shows the score. So I am going to go and find a text block to do that. So let's put the text. I kind of want to put the score in the top right corner. So I'm going to look for coordinates here, maybe 315.30. Mouse hovering over. And I'm going to have it say score. And notice how this score is in quotes, which means I just want you to write score. That's what that means. Cool. And I kind of like it there. If you want to change the size, you can do that. I might make it 30. Is that too big? That is a little too big. I'll make it 20. Yeah, that's a pretty good size. And then I think I'll move it a little further to the left. And I also want to change the color to, and by the way, you can do that with fill. because it looks cooler than gray. So now we have this thing called score, but we still don't have a score updating, right? And why that is because we actually need, remember how we have this variable up here called score? We need to print the variable score. And that's not score in quotes, like score in quotes just means write SCORE. But if you don't have the quotes, it means print the variable. So we want to add another text block, and maybe we'll put it to be 350, so it's a little further to the right, and then 30. And instead of having quotes, right, delete these quotes and just write score. And if we do that, perfect. We now have a scoreboard. It's super ugly, so I'm going to make it 370 to move it further to the right. Awesome. So now we have a scoreboard, right? That looks really cool. Okay. And obviously test your code to make sure it works. Now, if your game is looking like this, you are doing really, really well. Now, you can then hit finish for this level. And the final level is just asking you to check over your game. So like, does it work? Are there any things you can add? Now, I actually would recommend that you do add a few things. So first of all, let me show you a weird bug in the game. So notice how when you go off the screen, it says game over, right? But if you push yourself back on the screen, you can kind of cheat, right? As long as like you go back on the screen, it doesn't really matter, right? So one thing that I did in my Butterfree game was I made it so if you went off the screen, what happened was your velocity X and your velocity Y goes to 0. So that means you can't move anymore. So in this game, if I were to go off the screen and you see I'm pressing the up button, it doesn't matter, right? So that's one little thing you could add that would fix that problem. I also decided to have an end screen where instead of game over, just being like a boring green screen, I also like decided to print a new sprite, which was like a game over screen. So if you want to upload a sprite and just put it in this if block to print at the end, that's another really cool thing you can do. You're just going to have to make all the other sprites visible false so that they don't show, but you could definitely do that. Another thing I did, which was something that you could maybe try if you're like really trying to push yourself, is I decided to make, instead of a coin that goes random, I thought it'd be way cooler to have this flower. Do you see how the flower is moving in a really cool way? It's kind of like floating across the screen. How I did that was I created a variable, which I called flower power, which starts at 200, right? So 200, if you look at Y, it's kind of in the middle of the screen, right? And we are actually setting the flower's Y value, which is like where it starts, to be flower power. So it's starting at 200. And what is happening with the flower when it moves is that it is going at a speed of 3. Its X is going random, so it could go anywhere like here or here. But flower power, which is its Y, which is like how high and low it is, it is going to be a random number from 50 to 350. So it's going to be anywhere along here. And what happens is if target's flower power is smaller than target Y, which is like if flower power, which is a random number, is less than Y, then it goes closer, right? The velocity goes closer. And if it's more, it goes further. And that makes this pattern. I don't think I explained that super well, but you can always have a look at the code and ask me in class if you want to try to make this. There are big bonus points if you do. But otherwise, you have finished your game. So you are done to hit finish, and very well done.